Hi Joe, how you doing, mate?
Hello, Gordon.
How's it going? How's this week been for you?
Well, pretty busy. We're trying to ramp up the Julian Assange pardon and free from prison. And I've just been at the Guardian where we did a vigil for their non-retraction of the lies
Yeah,
about
this
Julian.
is where you and I met, isn't it? We met. I mean, one of the first times I came down to London. It was probably outside the Ecuadorian embassy, wasn't it? Remember that? It was all that long ago. That's when we met, and obviously you've been very active in the Free Assange protests down in London. I wanted to get you on and talk about what you've been doing. So, you've been outside the Guardian today.
Yes, we did a Chelsea Manning birthday tribute,
Happy
being the
birthday,
17th of
Chelsea.
December. And Chelsea's done fantastic work in supporting whistleblowers and their journalists who rely on them for the information that WikiLeaks published on the Afghan and Iraq logs, and also to demand that they retract the Luke Harding story, the fake news of Paul Manafort that they alleged had visited Julian at the Ecuadorian embassy, which was a complete and utter fabrication. The most surveilled building in the world for nearly 10 years, and no record of Paul Manafort whatsoever. And you were there, and when I went the first time to the embassy, not long before he was kidnapped, um, the outrage and the alarm that the threat of the extradition and him being dragged out the embassy, I've never seen anything like it, and it shocked me to the core. And yourself was very helpful. I said to you at the time, "What can I do? I'm come down here, and there are all these other news organisations who are waiting like vultures to see him dragged out the embassy." And thanks to you, you said, "Well, you got a phone, film stuff, and put it on the YouTube. It
Yeah,
doesn't take any money." And
that's
that's
what
what
we
I
got to
did.
do.
And from that day on, I had a channel, EF Press, very much because of yourself and also similar independent journalists who are telling the truth and telling the news as it is, not as they would like it to be.
Yeah, it was really important that we get our cameras out there and we start recording stuff and really get in the media's face as well, because they pretty much had it their own way for 8 years on this gigantic story, and they'd smeared and they'd slandered, and they'd led a campaign of hate against him. And I suppose when they did drag him out of his asylum, it's certainly lit a fire under my arse as well, because my arse anyway, because I just basically stuck on my Dr. Martens and went down there and pretty much said to the press, "Listen, if I catch any of you saying any lies about him, you're going to have me in your face with a microphone, and I am going to be really documenting just how much of a big shit you are." And surprise, surprise, Joe, that first time at the magistrates court, when I did my little speech that they wrote about, and I got in their face and really told them, just what the average man, on the average person on the street thinks about their campaign of hate that they've led against him. They disappeared after that, didn't they? They were hardly there. They didn't want to show up. Just shows how much of a bunch of invertebrates that they are. That, one guy from Wolverhampton turns up and a couple of other people turn up to just say, "No, you're a bunch of lying gits," and they all flee. Isn't that strange?
It's It's very shocking, actually, and by any standard, whatever standard you set your rules by, whether it's a legal standard, whether it's a moral standard, whether it's a journalistic standard, they have failed, and they really are no longer. They cannot claim to have that press badge. That should be taken away from them, because they are not doing what any journalist does. And the first thing a journalist does is go out on the street and talk to people. That's,
Gather
when you go to
information.
journalism school, you say, well, there's an incident down there at Waterloo or wherever. Go down, speak to the people that witnessed it, and find out what happened. That is sort of page one of journalism. And with the Julian Assange case, we had the privilege of information that they would prefer never to see the light of day. And due to the bravery of Chelsea Manning and the refusal of the other liberal media to publish her revelations from the Defense Department of America, it was WikiLeaks that got to publish them. And the other newspapers used WikiLeaks and used Chelsea Manning to enable them to publish the story without the legal liability of being either the leakee or the publisher itself. And from that moment on, from 2010 onwards, we don't have a free press in this country. And without the independent media and the people who pick up the camera and say, right, I'm going to go out and find out for myself what is happening, we wouldn't know anything. And without WikiLeaks, we didn't know even less about where our money is being spent at this very moment and has been spent for many a year in killing the black and brown people over in the Middle East and the southern nations. And that's what we've been doing. That's what we're complicit in. Our money, our troops, our NATO or whatever they are, the special forces, they're out there killing these people. And as we all know in war, and it doesn't, you don't have to have a sort of Nazi war, any war, the main casualty is always civilians. It's never the troops. Soldiers, they spend their whole life protecting themselves from getting killed. And unless you put in some, what they call the explosive devices in a road or somewhere in the middle of nowhere, then you might kill a few. But really, on the whole, the casualties are 90% civilian.
Yeah, and especially with the way that we do warfare these days, it's all with drones, isn't it? And with drones, we know that the kill rate is around one bad guy per 9 innocents. That's just unacceptable, isn't it? You wouldn't have a death penalty in this country or in America. You wouldn't, I mean, you haven't got it over here, but in America, you wouldn't have the death penalty if 9 out of every 10 people that you killed were innocent, would you?
Indeed. And of course, this is the fact that the main newspapers won't publish. I mean, back in the day with Vietnam, every other day there was a headline in a paper about the terrible war in Vietnam. There were pictures of children on fire running down roads. These things, you will never see these in mainstream media now. And these images were enough to end a war. When they published those images, that was the end of the Vietnam War. I mean, maybe it took the administration 3 years to catch up with the public in America, but certainly those were shocking enough to turn people against war. And today we don't see the victims. We don't see the pictures of the mutilated bodies. We don't see the pictures. The only pictures we see are those that are leaked by people within the services who are outraged themselves, as Chelsea Manning was.
Absolutely.
And, we've got to end these wars. These wars are killing the globe. And it's not just Julian Assange's case of journalists being imprisoned and silenced. Throughout many of the Western so-called democracies, they're putting a ban on journalism and telling people they can't take pictures of police or they can't take pictures of incidents where people are being assaulted by the security services. And this is what we're facing now today. And The Guardian, really, it begins and ends at The Guardian. Because The Guardian benefited from the WikiLeaks publications. They benefited from Chelsea Manning's data that she provided. And now they are the opposite. They've gone 180 degrees into some kind of state propaganda sheet. And it's incredible. It's unbelievable.
You say opposite there, and this is something that I was thinking about last night, Joe, because, I've always, if somebody's hearing me for the first time, the reason I am so animated about this cause is because what I believe is WikiLeaks, the model of WikiLeaks is journalism for the digital age. What Julian Assange did, he took journalism from the analog era and transferred the fundamentals of it to the digital and created what I believe is a flawless system which, if democracy was built on, it would be near as damn it brilliant. Now that's why I support it. I believe that there are 4 fundamentals to journalism. The first being that you need to be a source that either gathers information or a source that people can come to you with information. Then you need to verify that it's true. That's the second key. Many outlets, especially over the last few years, have just skipped that step altogether and not verified it's true and just publish sources say. Doesn't matter whether it's true, sources say, which is obviously bad for people's misinformation is being misinformed is worse than being uninformed, in my opinion. Then the third obviously remit of journalism is to publish the information on a platform if it is in the public interest, which obviously everything is that the Julian Assange and WikiLeaks have done is. And then fourth is to protect your source, which WikiLeaks do better than any other publication. So here's the thing. The first point of that is to either publish information, be a source of information, or a source that people come to and give you information. Now, what they've done, as you say, it's opposite now, because that's what journalism used to be. It used to be people coming up to you, coming up to journalists and saying, I've got this information. Here's the proof. They're doing shit. They're corrupt, these people are, and we would publish that. Or investigative journalists would investigate the government and they would show us that the government are corrupt, etc. Now it's the opposite. It's reversed. The people who we are meant to know everything about, the people who are public servants, who are there to serve us, we know nothing about whatsoever. We don't know what they're doing. We don't know what they're doing in our name. We don't know what they're doing with our money. We don't know what dealings that they've got. We've got nothing. Meanwhile, they have got every piece of information on any one of us whatsoever. And Snowden released obviously the amount that they can do now with regards to tracking, etc., etc. And Julian Assange has released it as well with I think it was Vault 7 that showed that, hey, they can listen to you through your TVs and everything. So now it's reversed. Now our journalists aren't coming to us, the regular people, for the information. They're just getting a phone call from somebody in government or somebody in MI6 or GCHQ, and they're saying blah, 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 blah. And then, I don't know, a week or two later, they'll get another call from somewhere and going blah, 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 blah. There you go. 2 sources. I can print this as if it's factual. That's not journalism. That's public relations, you sycophantic assholes. Journalism is publishing what other people don't want to hear, and everything else is public relations. And that's what you're doing right now at The Guardian, at The Telegraph, at the BBC. Yes, at the BBC as well. We want the receipts, goddammit. We have had 4 years. I'm sorry, Joe, but this is pissing me off. We've had 4 years of them saying Russia has installed the President of the United States. Are you freaking kidding me? When did you think I was born? Yesterday? This is insane. Meanwhile, you've got the person who has got a 100% track record of telling us the truth locked up in our Guantanamo Bay right now. So it's thanks to people like you getting the information out there that is crucial. And this is why it was crucial that we get the information out there, because I was with you on Saturday. You do great work every Saturday. You protest outside Piccadilly. How long have you been doing that now?
God, it's over a year.
And it's every weekend almost, rain or shine, you and a group of other people.
There was one Saturday during the recent lockdown where we went to Trafalgar Square instead, and Piers Corbyn showed up at Piccadilly to support us, but we weren't there. Right. And the police on that occasion arrested loads of people there for being there for any purpose other than shopping. It's been very good, though. It's a good site. We get good engagement. There's a lot of international support there. We meet a lot of people from around the world, and they're fantastic and much better informed than us. I mean, it's amazing when you use the opening gambit of, do you know about Julian Assange? Do you know what's happened to him in this country? And 9 out of 10 of the UK people would say, I'm not quite sure. Wasn't he released from prison? They actually think he's been released for some reason. I don't know why. But the international audience, no, they say, oh yes, we know all about him and it's a terrible thing. And they're very, very more clued up. I don't know whether that's because they're internet savvy and they research their own things online, or they have better mainstream news. I doubt they do.
They have better media. You're absolutely right. I've got to do a write-up. I'm going to do a blog post. I'm actually writing it today about my experience on Saturday. And the overriding experience is this, Joe. You're right there. People aren't informed. The English population, they're not informed and they don't know. When you tell people that's the question I would ask people. What do you know about Julian Assange? Do you know? And then I would ask them and listen to them and then inform them with factual information of what he's done and why he's in Belmarsh. There's two things that jumped out to me, and I spoke to dozens and dozens of people like you did. The thing that jumped out to me is, first of all, the British public sort of know that something's not quite right with this. They know that he shouldn't be where they sort of, as much as the decade of smears, etc., people tend to no, they don't believe it. They know something's up with this. And the second thing is, when we tell them that he's in Belmarsh, they flip out. That's when people are like, what? We're doing that and he's committed no crime, none? That's when people are like, this is not right. And the one person I did speak to last week who knew all about it was a Spanish lady. She could I speak a little Spanish, but she was telling me all about it because she gets her news from a Spanish outlet. And this is why I think they've kept the lid on it, Joe, because when people know and people understand that, oh, this is what the truth is, they're absolutely furious, aren't they?
Totally shocked as well that this could happen in what we thought was some form of democratic society.
Yeah, this is not Turkey or Macedonia or any of those places. This is the United Kingdom. This is the great bastion of what they say is the morality of the. This is us. Also, we're the bad guys.
We have a history of British political and American political philosophy that to run a government well with a democratic so-called election system every 4 to 5 years, you must have a balance of power. And that power has always been divided between the administration that are coming up with these various laws, etc., the parliament, the judiciary, and indeed the enforcement officers on the street. And the balance between the three keep each other in check. Now, if the judiciary do not keep the administration and the parliament in check when they pass these laws that are nonsense, then their balance is no longer there. And the judiciary just become a mouthpiece of the state. Mm-hmm. The fourth estate, as you've identified well, the media, is supposed to be a balance on all these three, and that they are supposed to deliver the criticism of the administration, the parliament, the judiciary, and the enforcement officers when necessary. That is the duty of the media. We don't care about, some soap star who fell over and broke their nail. That we're not interested. What we're interested in is, where is our money? Why aren't we getting any of it? And how can you fuck up a pandemic worse than this government? You can't. We're the worst in the world. Yeah. I don't know anyone who's had more BS and lies and rubbish come out of their administration than the UK. And it's sad to see, because without a balance of power, without those forces coming in and telling the administration, you can't do this, you got to do that. We've got human rights, we've got legal rights, we've got the rights of the citizenry to be involved in the decisions that affect their lives. And voting every 4 or 5 years is insufficient. If Absolutely. You're going to do these sort of massive changes to people's freedoms and liberties, and confine journalists in prison for publishing the truth, then we need to have the balance restored. And when the judiciary fail, when the law enforcement fail, when Parliament fails, and when the government fails, you only have the people. You've got no one left. There's no one else to shout for the cause of maintaining our liberties. And we've fought hard for these liberties. It's not something that's happened overnight. It's hundreds and hundreds, and if not thousands of years of fighting and saying, no, we're not putting up with this. We are going to have our liberties and we're going to guard the freedom. And the UK, remember, the UK is one of the few countries in the world where you do not have a legal obligation to carry ID on the street. You don't even have to carry your driving license when you're driving a car, because one of our liberties in this country is the idea that you can go out and about without having to prove who you are, whether you're white, black, Chinese, Japanese, or whatever you are. You, as a British citizen, have a right to go out and do your business, do your protest, do whatever you need to do to get through the week. And that, funnily enough, these rights people forget. So when the police challenge you for these fixed penalty notices and demand your name and address or some proof of identification, they don't understand what liberties they're treading on in this country.
No, they don't. And there's a couple of things there I wanted to pick up on. First of all, the failing of the media to tell us about war. That's a key one, because remember the Guardian and the New York Times and they all published these leaks from WikiLeaks. They all published them. They all profited from them. It was big news. And then they all threw them under the bus as soon as the intelligence agencies wanted to get their hands on it. We know this. But then they went quiet about war, didn't they, Joe? How often have the Guardian, for instance, told us that currently, right now, we are facilitating a war in Yemen where 20 million people are starving? We are facilitating this, and they're silent on it almost. If people in this country knew what we were doing abroad, they would be apoplectic and they would be very loud in voicing their disgust at it and making sure that the next person that they get elected wouldn't facilitate any wars abroad. And that's the first thing that I want to pick up on. It's not just the Guardian, it's obviously the entire media. They're failing of telling us about war, and our atrocities around the world that have been done in our name is atrocious. And this is one of the reasons why we've got to free Julian. But also, the Guardian, you were there today. Did you speak to people going in and the crowd and etc.? What is the plan when you get there?
Well, we spoke to many passerby.
Was Owen Jones there? Did he go past it? Because he's been extremely vocal on the Assange thing, hasn't he? The liberal hero Owen Jones. Didn't he say that he wants to? I think he should go to Sweden. He said, or something like that, didn't he? Our liberal king journalist in this country. How pathetic is it that you can't? Our liberal king can't stand up for the biggest case of press freedom ever. It's pathetic, isn't it?
It is very sad, but I'm afraid the Guardian journalists are few and far between in the offices. I think they're sitting at home with their Chianti, doing it all online, and getting their Associated Press and Reuters news feeds for all their foreign desk stories, so they don't even have to go anywhere beyond the back step to get their international news.
And all of their leaks come from phone calls from GCHQ at the Garden now. So, there's no need to go into the office, is there, really?
Well, not at all. And also, if you look at the global newspapers, 70% of the foreign news stories they run are down the wire. So they come from 3 or 4 of the big press associations, which have pre-filtered the stories, and they have their own security connections to make sure the stories run with the narrative that they're promoting in any particular foreign jurisdiction. So we do find that, especially the Guardian, use these services and then creatively invent some other story that they want to pin on that particular country, whether it's Saudi Arabia, whether it's Iran, whether it's Israel, whatever the slant they're going to put on it. And you'll often see in their stories multiple journalists credited it, as well as the AP or the Reuters service that provided the bones of the story. And it's not journalism. It really has no relationship at all to what we expect to be reported. And how can you report on a country such as Venezuela, which the Bank of England have seized their gold and have told the Venezuelans that they're not a legitimate administration? With the backing of the English, the judiciary, and with the foreign secretary and with parliament. So these issues are ignored in the British media, absolutely, and their reporting is atrocious, and it's a very poor standard. And from the days where you might have a foreign correspondent in the very country that you're reporting on, which was the ideal situation, to a reliance on these sort of security feeds and AP feeds that are just telling you the stories from the angle of that particular security service feed. And I don't think anymore you can have any doubt, anybody, that when you pick up the Guardian or the Sun or the Times or any of them, that you're going to get anything that legitimizes either a socialist or a pacifist country. So if you've got a country that is against war and they don't like sovereign territories being invaded, you'll find they get a blackening on those feeds.
Their elections are fraudulent. I'm thinking
Exactly.
Ecuador, I'm thinking Venezuela, I'm thinking Syria, Iran, etc., etc. It's
and
always
what they did in Bolivia. They couped Bolivia and then turned round, and the electorate turned and said, no, we actually like our socialism and we rather like having a share of any of the wealth or source profit that comes from our own country, which to me seems like the number one. If you don't have some control or profit from your own resources in your country, then God forbid what happens to them when they get abroad.
Yeah, and it is all about resources as well whenever it comes to this. I mean, Ecuador, I'm thinking immediately, I'm thinking of the lithium that they're trying to mine over there. I know Elon Musk made a tweet saying we will coup who we want, and that didn't go down very well. But yeah, the media, the Guardian especially, I've got a special amount of hate for. And I just want to stop on them for a moment, because you mentioned the Manafort story there and Luke Harding. This Luke Harding, he's made millions, hasn't he, about these lies with regards to Julian Assange. He's made a fortune, this man has.
He's published books, he's had syndicated articles over the world, he's been on talk shows, he does all the things that generate an income above and beyond his Guardian salary. And he is a very wealthy person. He has become the elites in which once he reported upon. And in the past, most probably took a more sympathetic angle to the working people than he does now. But indeed, they've got themselves in a trap at The Guardian. They absolutely should have retracted that story years ago.
Yeah.
They can't retract it now because they've syndicated it, and all their partners in the LA Times, the New York Times, etc., the Washington Post, they have all republished that story. And
well, that was the intent of it, wasn't it, Joe? Let's face it. That was why they did it. They've published that absolute full story. So knowing that this lie is going to go halfway around the world, and these outlets over in America are going to use it to bash Donald Trump over their head, and they're going to use it to prop up their Russiagate lie, and they're going to use it in the case of the DNC, they're going to use it as a fundraiser, because they then started, correct me if I'm wrong, their lawsuit against Donald Trump, WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, and the Russians, which fell flat on its face, obviously, because there was no proof there other than this article in The Guardian. So, they're creating their own news they're creating their own future here by just putting something in the news, saying, oh, well, this is true, it must be true, even though they've given you absolutely no evidence whatsoever, when if it happened, we would have lots of evidence of it. Like you said, it's the most surveilled building in the world. No other Guardian journalist there has even referenced that article in The Guardian. Luke Harding has gone on to write another book, another one. His last one was a book on collusion that didn't prove that there was any collusion whatsoever between Trump and Russia. And then this one, he doesn't even mention in this book the fact that Manafort, so he said, met with Julian in the embassy. And this man has gone on to make millions and millions and millions, and still the Guardian prop him up as if he is the voice of authority on all things Assange, WikiLeaks, and Russia and Putin and Trump. This is absolutely disgusting. And people, in my opinion, this does more damage, right? What the Guardian do here, you tell me, Joe, you see if you agree with this, see if my audience agree with this. What the Guardian have done with this and what Luke Harding has done with this is far more dangerous than anything that Alex Jones or some far-right nutjob crazy person could do by spreading, because this stuff, people take Luke Harding seriously. Very few people take what Alex Jones take serious, but people take what is in The Guardian seriously. Still, I know, after all these years, but they do. This is dangerous, isn't it, mate?
I think not only that, but what it again proves, and time and time again, and Julian Assange warned us about this 10 years ago, about the media's role in spreading these stories.
He must get so bored being right all the time. He really must.
You get into a habit where you're quoting anonymous sources, and in the Manafort article, the only source they did mention was the Ecuadorian security services, which they claimed had some log of Manafort's visit, which never materialized and was obviously an invention. But everything else, and I think I counted them at one stage, there were like 14 sources that were anonymous. They quote, this source says this source said that, blah, blah, blah. The problem they've got into, going back to the earlier issue, is that once this story exists and has been used and quoted and syndicated, other newspapers have got in the habit of not only using a similar methodology, but to quote the other newspapers as an authoritative source. Yeah. And the problem with that, and where they've got caught out, is that when you do that, then the Mueller investigation uses those stories as a basis of some kind of investigation. Yeah. The QC Lewis for the US prosecution at the Old Bailey used the Luke Harding article as evidence that Julian had some Russian thing going. And so the newspapers, by doing this, by accepting these unnamed sources and by quoting each other's as authoritative sources, and well, the New York Times says that there was a Manafort thing in New York, and the Guardian says there was a thing in London, and that, you know, these are circular, and they come back and bite them in the arse, because that means that once they've gone down that road, they can't withdraw it. They cannot retract and say, look, we fucked up. We used some idiot called Luke Harding who got these stupid stories off his security friends, and then whatever the narrative was being promoted by the US prosecutors, the William Barrs and the Donald J. Trumps who were after Assange. This is the situation they're in now. And it's untenable, and they have no credibility left. They have destroyed themselves from being a sort of bastion of the liberal and progressive news into basically state propaganda. And you're absolutely right. There's no way out for them, really. They can't, you know, without admitting what they've done, they blindly carry on. And, you know, it's like when, you know, all the evidence, irrefutable evidence to prove that it's a lie, and they still sit there in their offices and refuse to accept that. And when you refuse to accept reality, when you deny the actual reality of the events on the ground and the evidence that has been collected in support of that, then you are in a very sad state. And you're, you know, as they say in the things, you know, they're in denial, and it's not a river in Egypt.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned the state of this bloody country and the way that we've reacted, or rather our lack of reaction to this coronavirus pandemic that's happened. The one thing that they have done, that the government have been extremely good. They haven't been good at feeding people, or they haven't been good at making sure that the virus didn't spread to people, and they haven't been good at anything really. But what they have been good at is cracking down in an authoritarian way on anybody that has got anything to say about the government that the government doesn't like. And one of those people is you and me and or anybody who has got something to say about the Assange thing. And a few weeks ago, you got arrested, didn't you? Tell us about that, mate.
Well, it was strange because having
First of
done
all,
the
first of all, can I just say, well, you're a police liaison officer as well, aren't you, Joe?
I was about to say, it's embarrassing. One of my roles at the Julian Assange Defence Committee is police liaison. And I got to be honest, I was the only candidate. No one else wanted to do it. So having...
No. You put your hand up and everybody else went, no, Joe can do it better than me. That's what happened.
No one wanted
Don't
to
sell
do
yourself
it. I begged
short,
them.
pal.
I begged them. I said, someone... Anyway, I have some experience in that field. So that's why I felt appropriate to volunteer myself. It was very strange because we started the protest as per usual. We asked two of the beat officers who were there, is it okay that we set up? And they said, yeah, that's fine. And so we started setting up the banners and the placards.
Was this at Piccadilly, was it?
Yes, this was at Piccadilly Circus.
So this was one of the regular weekly Piccadilly ones?
Yeah, Saturday, okay. 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock every Saturday. Still going. We did it last Saturday. We're doing it this Saturday.
Yeah, if you're doing it this Saturday, I'll be there, mate. I will be there.
Great. Oh, fantastic. It was good last Saturday. That was great.
Yeah, we won't be able to have a beer after because everything's closed now in London. But yeah, it'll be.
I know. Yeah, well, So, sorry, I lost the thread there a little bit.
Go on. It was the regular Piccadilly one.
Yeah, and then suddenly, within about 2 minutes, I think 2 vans and then another 2 full of cops screeched to the side, and they all jumped out and ran up to everybody, surrounded individuals, and started saying...
How many were there, Joe, can I ask?
There were about 15 to 20 protesters.
Okay.
But we weren't really congealed. There was like a few by the statue. There were a few of us going round handing out leaflets already. There was a couple with placards who'd moved to the other side of the street. So we had actually spread out, which I thought was quite good.
Mm-hmm.
And they surrounded everyone, and they started harassing people, saying you have to disperse. The COVID section 19 says that if you don't disperse, we can issue you with a fixed penalty notice. If you failed to give your name and address, they would then threaten to arrest you. And they explained this to various different people, and we said, okay, well, we're going to pack up, and they started packing up. Then they targeted Jill, who was holding a placard away from everyone else, and they surrounded her, about 6 to 8 of them, and then arrested her. And they were trying to get the cuffs on her. They were brutalizing her. She was screaming about, what the hell are you doing? They hadn't informed her of her rights, or they hadn't actually told her what she was being charged or arrested for. I followed her with my camera because I was filming at the same time. They took her to one of the police wagons waiting round the side. And at that point, I was having a discussion with 2 officers who had been trailing me and telling me that we had to disperse. And I said, okay, well, I'm just going to check on Jill to see that she's okay. And you're not brutalizing her in the van or anything, because it didn't look good for the cops. And then at that point, a super pointed at me and Peter and just told the cops to arrest them. So at that stage, the 2 that had been speaking to me, who I got on very well with, and one of them had done a dissertation on WikiLeaks and knew all about Julian. So that was a crazy conversation as you're being arrested. They would seem very nice people. And they said, look, I'm sorry, we've got to arrest you. And I'm like, okay, well, that seems a shame because you've just arrested the police liaison officer. So you haven't, you've done a bad day's work today, boys. And then they took me to Charing Cross Police Station. Process took about 2.5 hours between the street and the cell. I spoke to many police officers on the way and harangued them about the ridiculousness of what they were doing and overstepping the mark. And 50% agreed with me. The other 50% had tattoos and looked like they were on steroids, to be honest. But the ones who actually had half a brain were willing to accept that the police had then overstepped the mark.
I've
And
spoken
that was
to a
it.
few. I've spoken to a few coppers over the last couple of years when we've been out and about, and none of them have known anything about it. And then the first copper I hear of that knows all about Julian Assange and WikiLeaks and did a dissertation on it, he arrests you? What,
Yes, he did. He did
have you never
apologise.
heard of the Nuremberg trials, you goddamn idiots?
He did apologise. He did apologise.
I hope so, but he still arrested you, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Well, he had no choice. The super pointed at me. I was.
Yes, he had a choice. He had a choice. He could turn around and say, "No, this man's done nothing wrong."
You're right. You're right. He should have, but he was only short. Anyway.
Napoleon complex. What an arsehole. The first copper I hear of that knows about it, and he arrests you.
Yes, he did know. And and the funny thing was while I was sitting in the van, and they didn't handcuff me or Peter because we weren't resisting. You know, I was having a conversation, so there was no need to restrain me. So I'm sitting there, and then Eric, the 92-year-old veteran supporter we all know and love, climbed in the van. He said, "Arrest me too." And they said, "We can't arrest him." I said, "I know you can't arrest him. He's 92. You arrest him, it's game over, mate." You know?
Oh, I love him.
I
love him.
I persuaded Eric. I said, "Look, you can't get arrested. I'll get in trouble. I'm the liaison officer. I can't have my veteran campaign arrested." He wanted to be arrested. He was desperate to. But I managed to persuade him. He regretted it. He said, "Oh, I wish I had got arrested." But I said, "Look, I can't, you know, I've got responsibilities. I can't have him arrested." And the police, they won't arrest him. They won't arrest. They will not touch him because they know that the sight of a 92-year-old being dragged off is not looking good on the TV. You know,
one of my friends, one of my disabled friends, who's in a wheelchair, was highly involved in the Extinction Rebellion protest last year, simply because they would put her on the front lines because she's unarrestable. You know, coppers arresting somebody with, you know, in a wheelchair with tubes up her nose and everything like that. It would be a PR nightmare. So, you know, people like Eric, you got to use him, put him in front of you. I would have used him like a shield. I would have said, "Eric, go stand there." He's brilliant. There was four of you arrested, wasn't there? There was you, Peter.
There was me, Alison,
was it Jill and Alison, wasn't
and Peter. On that day, the four of us arrested.
Now, I've reached out to Jill and Alison through a mutual friend of ours, and I tried to actually get them to jump in on this, but I haven't heard back from them, unfortunately. So maybe I can do another
Guardian.
Sorry?
Jill was at the Guardian, and I think she stayed on because I had to leave to get for this. But a few of them stayed on a bit later, so I don't know where she's got to.
From what I heard, they were really quite rough with the two women, weren't they? They didn't handcuff you and Peter because you weren't resisting, but they were quite rough with the women, weren't they?
She wasn't resisting either. They beat her up. I mean, the guy trod on her foot deliberately, then accused her of assault. I mean, it was a terrible thing. You know, and it's no way to treat your citizenry. You know, whatever your views, whatever your ideas, you don't treat your citizens like that, whatever the situation. And in fact, in a pandemic, you expect better behaviour from your public servants.
You really do.
Than to do such a thing. And as I said, half the police I spoke to agreed with that. And I did harangue many of them about the irony of people who are out on the street protesting against arbitrary arrest, getting arrested. I said, you know, do you see the irony? And they did. I mean, half of them did. But you never know. You know, being a Metropolitan Police officer is a job that they're not going to be doing for long because they're being replaced by Serco part-timers, and they know that. And I have conversations with them about that very situation. And I say to them, have they sold your police station off yet? Have you got a little tin office down at some industrial estate to work from? And they know, they laugh. They go, no, not yet. And I say, well, have you been replaced by your Serco part-time 0-hour contract replacement with 2 weeks training? And they laugh because they know it's true.
I like to say to them, so you're confident you'll get your pension when you retire, yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
You're confident it'll still be there,
They
yeah?
won't. They won't. They'll get half what they thought they're going to get. They're the
hired
first on the
thugs.
line because public servants are there at our expense. We're paying for this. And it's like, you know, you're paying your own jailer, you know, and as Julian Assange has shown us all, that this money, there's better things to be spent on. And we, as we started out about the endless wars that we're financing and supporting, you know, and I thought, you know, economic sanction, military invasion, proxy occupation, resource capture, and the end of sovereign nations' right to decide for themselves was in the history books. I thought that was something we wouldn't see again in my lifetime. And after Vietnam, we thought that the war was a bad thing. And then the Iraq war, when Tony Blair and Bush decided they were going to invade the Middle East, was a turning point. And ever since then, we seem to be at war. And I don't know why. I have nothing against anyone in Afghanistan. I don't know many Afghanistans. I would like to know some. I'm prepared to listen to whatever they have to say, and I'm happy for them to determine their own future in whatever they want to do. And if they've got problems with their administration, that's for them to sort out and do what they need to do to progress. And I think that is something that people forget. Do you know anyone from Syria? Have you got any friends from Yemen?
You say you don't know why.
Talk to the people.
You say you don't know why.
Wow.
We know why, Joe. We know why. It's for resources. That's what it is. Afghanistan is all about the opium, and America has got an opiate crisis. We know this. You know, they make half the world's opium, I think, in Afghanistan. It's incredible. You know, and there's stories of basically, you know, American forces going over there, and they're coming back and saying, yeah, we were basically just hired thugs for the opium farmers. We were just protection for the opium fields, you know. And if you look in Syria, the reason why they want regime change in Syria is the oil and the gas pipeline through it that they want to put through it to obviously to be able to supply Europe at the moment. Obviously, the Russians have just built a new gas pipeline. That's what it's all about. And if you go down in South America, Venezuela's all about the oil. Bolivia was all about the lithium. You know, it's all about the resources. And there's a statistic that I like to tell people that it's true. It's actually accurate. If you look at all the countries that the United States are at war at, currently bombing, and then you add the countries that they have sanctioned, and then you add in China, because they're at war with China in this trade war, the United States are basically at war with 25% of the planet, the poorest 25% of the planet, for resources, so that they can have 18 different different flavors of Doritos and shiny shoes with lights that light up in them. You get, you know, and it's consumerism. That's what it is. That's what's basically driving all of these wars and driving us into extinction with climate change, etc. That's what it's all about. This is not a big secret. What it needs is somebody in our fucking news to tell people that that's what's going on, but they're not doing it. They're telling us everything but that. They'll tell us about, I don't know, Sam Smith coming out as 17 different people, or they'll tell us that Vladimir Putin, you know, installed Donald Trump as the bloody 45th president. What a load of crap that is. They'll tell us any fairy tale apart from the truth. We're at war with all these countries because we want to steal their shit. Now, that's not going to get us very far, is it, mate? It's just we're going to end up this, sooner or later, somebody's going to get a bomb and it's going to come our way and we'll say it was their fault. But really, we've been punching and slapping them in the face for 60, 70 years, especially in the case of Iran. Some cases even longer. you know, and when I say America around here, and you mentioned the wars, people aren't aware of over here of just how embedded we are with the Americans in these wars. You know, when it comes to Yemen, the war in Yemen, where there's a genocide at the moment, and there's 20 million people starving, and there's the largest outbreak of cholera ever, and there's like millions of people displaced, and, you know, largest outbreak of cholera ever, and then Saudi Arabia target the water towers, you know, and it's us that are training their pilots. It's us that are selling them the weapons and the planes and the bombs. And it's us that are picking out the targets with the intelligence. We're doing everything but pull the trigger to kill these poor bastards. And then you look at Syria. We're basically embedded in Syria doing an absolute massive propaganda campaign on behalf of Americans while they try and topple what they call a brutal dictator. But from everything I can see, is a elected leader of a secular country in the Middle East, one of the most secular, certainly less brutal than other people, other countries in the area, such as Saudi Arabia, that we're allied to and call our friends, who chop the heads off gay people and throw them off frigging buildings. This can't go on, can it, Joe? And I really wish we had a media that was telling people exactly what was going on, instead of coming up with the bullshit that they're coming up with at the moment.
Well, I think absolutely. And the fact is, and if we look back over the years of the many involvements that the British and the British Empire have had in war, the only conclusion I can come to now is we cannot be a moderating force in foreign policy. We've lost that distinction of being trusted by any other country to do the right thing. And if you look at the countries specifically that we have what I would call a vengeance against, where we're taking on the role of the NATO-US international police, are the very countries that have the least to do with the US, the NATO, and the UK. And if you're not our friend, and if you don't do what we tell you to do, then suddenly you're this big bad, you know, dictator who's killing their own people and deserves to be invaded. And I think we really have come to a point where what we do is a license for others to do the same. So when we're involved in invasions on Iraq, then you get Saudi Arabia thinking, well, we can go into Yemen because the Brits and the Yanks are doing this illegal thing of a sovereign invasion, and they're getting away with it. So it's a license to these other despotic regimes. And look at Turkey, which have now occupied parts of Syria, have occupied parts of the disputed Armenian territories. They've occupied, and they're using, and the ultimate irony of Turkey is that they're using the ISIS army, the so-called terrorists, as part of their frontline troops.
Yeah.
And if you go into Syria, you will see ISIS units set up, protected by the Turkish military outposts which they have in Syria.
When we're paying them, they're moderate rebels, mate.
And Turkey is part of NATO. This is what we're doing. And the license that Turkey feels they have to do these terrible things is only in regard to what we've been doing for the many a year. So, you know, you can't act as a moderator. You can't say to Turkey, oh, please don't invade another country on your border and kill all these people, because you're doing exactly the same thing next door. So I think it really has come to the point now where it's up to the non-aligned states and the Chinese, the Russians, the Venezuelans, the Cubans, those states that do not have this vested interest in a US economy and a US police force, as it were, are the ones that we're going to have to rely on. And if that makes me a Putin puppet, then so be it, because I have more trust in what Putin says about international affairs than I do on Mr. Boris Johnson in the number 10.
So sad. It really is. It's so sad. I did have a question then, but it's gone out of my head. Oh yeah, that's just going on, just following on from what you were saying there. There was, I think it was Macedonia, the president of Macedonia or somebody like that was having an interview a few weeks ago. I don't know whether you saw it with a BBC reporter, and the BBC reporter started asking him about you know, their record on journalism and what have you, and
Azerbaijan.
he just
It
sat
was
there and
at,
went, "How can you even ask that
yeah.
question with Julian Assange in your capital?" You know, we're not the moral authority on any country. We can't be whilst we're doing this, can we?
It's impossible. No. And I mean, the UK couldn't even broker a deal with the Northern Ireland peace deal. That had to be done with American intervention because obviously the Republicans have very little trust of the British government. They're saying these people are murderers. They come over and assassinate our people. And you know, so they wouldn't sit down at a table until the Americans came in and said, well, look, you know, let's do a deal, and there's a load of cash for you here, and there's a
Yeah.
load of cash for you there. But the British were not trusted to be moderators in their own sphere, and that proves that today our reputation abroad is abysmal. And I think it was the president of Azerbaijan who said how dare you criticize
Azerbaijan,
us?
sorry. Yeah.
I know he was wonderful. I mean, God knows what he's like, but in terms
Yeah,
of
he's a
Julian
proper war
Assange, he
criminal,
was 100.
apparently.
I think so,
Proper
but
war
he
criminal.
was
We have got no
100%
moral
correct.
authority on him. It's really quite
Yeah, well, I
amazing.
mean, you know, he's correct. You can't. There's no argument you can put against him to say that the UK has a moral authority to criticise him for persecuting journalists. They haven't. They can't. And as long as Julian Assange is sitting in Belmarsh prison, and also as long as they're pursuing other whistleblowers who are
Yeah.
trying to tell the truth about their involvement, often in criminality by the state. I mean, that we're talking about state criminality. We're not talking about petty theft or, you know. And unfortunately, I think in the times we live in, you know, when I was younger, if someone robbed a pensioner with a hoodie and a knife outside the post office, they'd be put away for a very long time in prison. Today, you can rob hundreds of thousands of pensioners from their pension fund and never pay that money back, and you're made into a knight. That tells you the system we have. That on the one hand, you know, the street criminal will see time, but the Sir Philip Greens remain free. And this is a comment on where our prosecutions should be. We have a director of public prosecutions. Why aren't they prosecuting banks? Why aren't they prosecuting corporate heads who've robbed their pensioners and deprived the employees of their just desserts after years of hard work? These are and why are they not prosecuting the war criminals? And as we know, and the irrefutable evidence that WikiLeaks has published, is that we have the evidence. We know who these people are. We know where they live. We know what they do. Their record is a matter of public record. So this is what we must demand of our judicial and our directors of public prosecutions. Sorry, they're doing a fire test in the building.
We're coming to the end anyway, mate.
Typical.
I was just about to wrap up.
Sorry.
So maybe they knew. Is there anything else you wanted to add while I got you, Joe? Thanks so much for coming on. It's been a great chat.
Just to, you know, get people subscribe. You know, Gordon does a great channel. If you can afford it, to support him on the Patreon, or not on the Patreon anymore, it's direct now. So go to his website. It's very, very important that we continue with the independent news, and to show up those are paid vast sums to do what we thought was a similar job, but turned out to be stenographers to the elites, I think, as Chomsky has it. That's it, really, Gordon.
You're an awesome man, Joe, and I'm really proud to call you my friend. Thank you so much for all the work that you've done for Julian. I'll see you Saturday, and yeah, we won't be going for a beer because everywhere is closed, but you know, we can have a chat before Christmas, and hopefully, you know, by then, I don't know, who knows, he might be free by Saturday. It's we'll see. It's we just need to keep pushing. You know, there's
it's hard.
we don't know why this person on Twitter, this pastor, came out and said what he said the other day, but you know, whatever the reason is, it's managed to get some traction, and there's millions of tweets around the world and what have you. And we just got to keep pushing, and hopefully justice will be done. Joe Brack, thanks very much, at EF Press on Twitter. Thanks very much, mate. It's a pleasure talking to you, and I'll see you Saturday.
Have a good night. I'll see you Saturday.